on, stand with me if you're able. Meet me in Judges chapter 19. We're in a series called Culture Wars. I believe we're 5 weeks in. I can't believe it's going that fast. We're in a series called Culture Wars, and what we're talking about is how Jesus came, engaged well in the culture, but was not transformed by the culture, but instead became a transformer of the culture. And so we looked at what it's going to take for us to not just exist in safe Christian spaces and be isolated, but what it's going to take for us to engage the culture, to be in the culture, but to be in the culture to transform the culture. And so we've talked about a variety of things. We talked about religion last week. We talked about alcohol, I think the week before that. We've talked about some gray areas, how to navigate those. And today we're going to talk about sex, the cost of sex. And we're going to look at Judges 19 and just see what the Spirit has to give us out of the text today. All right, Judges chapter 19. We're going to read the whole thing. It's like 30 verses, so let's lock in and get after it. Judges chapter 19, verse 1. And here's what the text says. Now it came about in those days when there was no king in Israel that there was a certain Levite. Everybody say Levite. Staying in the remote part of the hill country of Ephraim, and took a concubine, everybody say concubine, for himself from Bethlehem in Judah. But his concubine played the harlot against him. Everybody say played the harlot. And she went away from him to her father's house in Bethlehem in Judah, and was there for a period of 4 months. Then her husband arose and went after her to speak tenderly to her in order to bring her back, taking with him his servant and a pair of donkeys. So she brought him into her father's house, and when the girl's father saw him, he was glad to meet him. His father-in-law, the girl's father, detained him, and he remained with him 3 days. So they ate and they drank and they lodged there. Now on the 4th day, they got up early in the morning, and he prepared to go. And the girl's father said to his son-in-law, sustain yourself with a piece of bread, and afterwards you may go. Come on, just have some breakfast with me, and afterwards you can go. So both of them sat down, they ate and they drank together, and the girl's father said to the man, please be willing to spend the night and let your heart be merry. Then the man arose to go, but his father-in-law urged him again, so that he spent the night there again. On the 5th day, he arose to go early in the morning, and the girl's father said, please sustain yourself and wait until afternoon. So both of them ate. When the man arose to go along with his concubine and servant, his father-in-law, the girl's father, said to him, behold, everybody say, behold. Now the day has drawn to a close. Please spend the night. Lo, the day is coming to an end. Spend the night here that your heart may be merry. Then tomorrow you may arise early for your journey so that you may go home. Verse 10, but the man was not willing to spend the night. So he arose and departed and came to a place opposite Jabus, that is Jerusalem, and there were with him a pair of saddled donkeys. His concubine also was with him. When they were near Jabus, the day was almost gone, and the servant said to his masters, please come and let us turn aside into the city of the Jebusites and spend the night in it. However, his master said to him, we will not turn aside into the city of foreigners who are not of the sons of Israel. Everybody say sons of Israel. But we'll go on as far as Gibeah. He said to his servants, come and let us approach one of these places, and we will spend the night in Gibeah or Ramah. So verse 14, so they passed along and went their way. The sun set on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. Everybody say Benjamin. They turned aside there, and in order to enter and lodge in Gibeah, when they entered, they sat down in the open square of the city, for no one took them into his house to spend the night. Verse 16, this is where it takes a turn. Then behold, say behold. An old man was coming out of the field from work at evening. Now the man was from the hill country of Ephraim, and he was staying in Gibeah, but the men of the place were Benjamites. Everybody say Benjamites. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the traveler in the open square of the city. And the old man said, where are you going and where do you come from? He said, we are passing from Bethlehem in Judah to the remote part of the hill country in Ephraim, for I am from there. And I went to Bethlehem in Judah, but I am now going to my house, and no man will take me into his house, meaning no one's showing him hospitality. Verse 19, yet there is both straw and fodder for our donkeys, and also bread and wine for me, your maidservant, and your man who is with your servants. There is no lack in anything, meaning I packed my bags. We have everything we need. We don't need anything from anybody. The old man said, peace to you. Only let me take care of all your needs. However, do not spend the night in the open square. So he took him into his house and gave the donkeys fodder, and they washed their feet and ate and drank. Verse 22, while they were celebrating, behold, everybody say behold. Say it again, say behold. The men of the city certain worthless fellows surrounded the house, pounding the door, and they spoke to the owner of the house, the old man, saying, "Bring out the man who came into your house that we may have relations with him, that we may have sex with him." Then the man, the owner of the house, went out to them and said, "No, my fellows, please do not act so wickedly. Since this man has come into my house, do not commit this act of folly. Here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. Please let me bring them out to you that you may ravish them and do whatever you wish. But do not commit such an act of folly against this man." But the men would not listen to him. So the man seized his concubine and brought her out to them, and they raped her and abused her all night until morning. Then they let her go at the approach of dawn. As the day began to dawn, the woman came and fell down at the doorway of the man's house where her master was until full daylight. When her master arose in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go on his way, then behold, his concubine was lying at the doorway of the house with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up and let us go." But there was no answer. Then he placed her on the body, and the man arose and went to his home. When he entered his home, he took a knife and laid hold of his concubine and cut her body into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout the territory of Israel. All who saw it said, "Nothing like this has ever happened or even been seen from the day when the sons of Israel came up from the land of Egypt to this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak up." Everybody say, "Speak up." I want to talk to you very briefly today from the subject, the cost of sex. The cost of sex. You may be seated. The cost of sex. A few years back, you guys probably see these things on TV fairly often. You see commercials on TV, or now you see commercials on the internet, and people are constantly trying to sell us stuff. And when they're trying to sell us stuff, they say, "Hey, for just $19.99 a month or $39.99 a month, you can get a particular subscription to something." And one time, a few years ago, my wife and I signed up for something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but we signed up for some type of prescription for something, believing what the ad said on TV was true, whatever good thing it was going to bring to our life, whatever convenience it was going to bring to our situation. We got excited about it, and we said, "Absolutely, let's sign up for this thing. It's just $19.99 a month." But unfortunately for us, we did not read the fine print. The fine print will let us know, and I'm letting you know, whenever you sign up for these things, what typically happens is if you don't cancel it at the end of that month, you're going to automatically be charged for another month. We had just intended to try it out a little bit just to get a sample of it, and it intended to cancel it, but somewhere along the line, we forgot to cancel it. And as we're going through life, maybe 6, 7 months later, we're going through our budget and kind of looking at stuff, and we're looking around like, why, who is this charge that I don't recognize coming out of our account? And we looked at it and we said, okay, I see it this month. And then as we started scrolling back, we're like, wait a minute, I see it the previous month, and then the next week, I see it the previous month, and then we keep going back, and we're seeing month after month after month, slowly but surely, this particular company has been draining us of our money. We thought initially all we were doing was signing up for this $19.99 subscription for whatever it was, and we end up paying probably like $240, $250 at the end of the day for whatever it was that we weren't even using anymore. I say all that to say, sometimes when it comes to the idea of sex, we think we're just signing up for this little encounter. It's just a $19.99 encounter, and that's it. That's all I'm signing up for, only to discover that when we read the fine print of this idea of sex, that when we look in the accounts of our hearts months later, we see that there have been deposits taken out over time, depleting us of the very things and resources that we need to be healthy. We're going to talk today out of one of the darkest hours in all of Scripture. Hopefully you caught some of what was going on in the text as we were reading, but this is one of the darkest, most sordid time periods in all of the history of of God's people. And this is where we're gonna kind of talk about the high cost of sex and how it plays out in our lives and in our families, in our community, and even beyond that. When we get to the book of Judges, we don't spend a whole lot of time in the book of Judges, but the book of Judges comes right after the book of Joshua. These can be looked at as two sides to the same coin. What the book of Joshua is going to show us is what it looks like when the people of God listen to the voice of God, obey what God has said, and how when we do those things, we experience the blessings of God. This is what Joshua is all about. On the flip side, when we get to the book of Judges, we see the exact opposite. Judges shows us what happens when we silence God, when we settle into sin, when we do our own thing, and we do that over time. If you do it long enough, you will see, not only will you not experience the blessings of God, but you will actually pay a high cost in every area of your life. One writer said the purpose of Judges is to show why Israel, a nation that God gave a head start in every facet of life, lost it all and did not experience God's promised blessings. There's a rhythm. If you listen closely, if you put your ear to your Bible, you will hear a rhythm kind of playing out through the book of Judges. Here's what the rhythm sounds like. Here's what it sounds like if you go from chapter 1 through chapter 20. Here's what it sounds like. The nation of Israel, when they got into the promised land, after the book of Joshua, they would continue to listen to God. Then they would live according to what God would say. Then after a while, they would hit the mute button on God. They would silence God. They would settle into sin. Then their lives would start falling apart. Then they would holler out to God for help. God, help me. God would help them out, pull them out, deliver them, and then they would go right back to listening and living according to God. But after a while, they would then silence God and settle back into sin. And then when life started falling apart on them again, then they would holler out to God for help. God, help me. God would help them. He would deliver them. He would pull them out. They would go back to listening and living for God. They would do that for a little while. Then over time, they would silence God and they would settle right back into sin. Their life would start falling apart again, and then they would again holler out to God for help. God, help me. God would help them. He would deliver them. He would pull them out. They would start, the song would start all over again. They would listen and they would live for God. Then they would silence God and they would settle back into sin. But the problem with the book of Judges is every time this cycle would repeat, when they got to the section of listening and living for God, that time got shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And the depths of their settling into sin got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And so the cycle got shorter and the spiraling got deeper. Everybody with me? We see this happen in the book of Judges 6 prominent times where they turn their back on God. They get into the rhythm of this song and they find themselves settling into sin, hollering out for help. God would deliver them again. Then they're living right. They're listening. They're living. Then they settle. And they do this over and over and over again. And what we see happen in the chapters 17 through 20 is at the end of the assembly line of this cycle, they get this package. And in this package are two things, and we see these two things in chapters 17 through 20. The first thing in this package that they get, the final product of repeatedly getting stuck in this cycle, the first product was idolatry. The first product was a faith that we talked about last week, a faith that's so diluted it's not effective or powerful or helpful for anybody to do anything with, idolatry. The second thing that comes out of this box, the final product of living this life according to this rhythm, is sexual immorality. They get into this place where the depths of their sexual indecency has gone to a place that ought to make you shudder as you read the text today. Sometimes our lives are lived to a similar soundtrack. If we're honest with ourselves, we do good in January. That's when we do the Daniel fast and we're making New Year's resolutions and we listen for God and we live for God. Come about spring break, we take that trip and we start sliding back and we silence God. Hit the mute button. I don't want you on this trip, God. And then we settle into sin again. Then we start feeling disconnected from God and we get mad at the church or we go to a new church because that church has me disconnected from God, only to get to the next church and realize that it's not the church, it's really me who's living according to this faulty soundtrack. Then things start going not the way we necessarily want them to go. And then we cry out to God, God, would you help me? And we rededicate our life to the Lord. And then we're good for about 2 weeks. We listen to God for about 2 weeks. Come to church consistently for about a month. We listen and we live according to what God says, and then we silence God when the family reunion comes up. And then we settle right back into sin. And then the same thing happens. We go to another church and we're saying, well, something's off in my life. Let me go to another church. And we go to another church only to discover that it wasn't the church. It was us living according to a faulty soundtrack. So we holler out to God for help and God delivers us again. And then we go right back to the same thing. I'll listen to God for a little bit and I'll live for him a little bit and then I'll settle back into sin and I'll silence God. And my admonition for us this morning is if we are living our life according to that soundtrack, we have a very good example of what the final product of your life and my life will be if we don't turn that song off and start playing a different one. When we double click on chapter 19, things have gradually slid out of control, just like a slow leak in a pipe that over time weakens and causes a major burst. We are about to see by the mishandling of sex over time that the pipe of human decency completely busts open, costing individuals, families, and entire community. The question we're going to wrestle with today is, how can we handle sex properly so that we are culture transformers? How can we handle sex properly so that we are culture transformers? The first thing we have to do is we have to yearn to please God with our sex lives. Everybody say, please God with my sex life. We have to yearn to please God. It starts there, this yearning deep in our hearts to please God with our personal sex life. In verse 1 of the text, we meet two people. We meet a Levite. A Levite is the tribe. Levites are people who are, in the Old Testament, they were part of the 12 nations of Israel, one of the 12 tribes that made up the nation of Israel. And in these 12 tribes of Israel, there were the Levites, and the Levites were the ones that were, the priests came out of the Levite line, the temple workers came out of the Levite line. These were the most, I guess you could say, religious. These are people who were kind of working in ministry. These were those kinds of people coming out of that line. And we understand that this Levite is married to a concubine. Everybody say concubine. When we read that ought to be the first thing that kind of makes you the hair on your head stand up a little bit. Say, wait a minute, this Levite is married to a concubine. It doesn't say that he's married to a wife. It says he's married to his concubine. Now, a concubine is like typically a servant that is in the household of a particular family. Sometimes when men and women were at their very worst, the husband, though he's married to his wife, would also sometimes have kids with the concubine, have kids with the servant that lived at the house. In this text is very confusing to most theologians because there's no mention of a wife. All there is a mention of is a concubine. Typically, if there's a concubine, it is implied that there's a wife, but there's enough language in the text that kind of lets us know that something weird is going on in their relationship. We would call it today a situationship. A situationship. You know what a situationship is? Well, if you don't, I went to the Urban Dictionary. The Urban Dictionary always can help us understand some of the lingo of the culture. Here's what the Urban Dictionary says. The Urban Dictionary says a situationship is a relationship that has no label on it. It's like a friendship, I'm gonna add this, with benefits, because it's more than a friendship, but it's not quite a relationship. It's just kind of complicated. It's like, it's not, she's not my fiance, but she's kind of like something because we have a history together, but I got this other lady on the side and then she's married anyway. And so it's kind of real complicated what we've got going on here. And the first clue that things are out of a little bit off is that this Levite is married to a concubine. And then we read a little bit further. Most situationships are going to lead to some type of sexual sin. Let me just throw that out there. Then in verse 1, it says, he took a concubine for himself from Bethlehem in Judah. Verse 2, it says, but his concubine played the harlot. Y'all know what that means? The concubine played the harlot. In other words, the concubine stepped out on him. In other words, the concubine had a side piece. In yet another way of putting it, the concubine, when the Levite would go to work, the concubine would call her lover and say, he's gone, come on through. She played the harlot on him. In other words, she had a weekend lover. Just on the weekends. We just get together on the weekends. She played the harlot on her husband. And somehow he found out, I don't know if she left her phone out on the nightstand. I don't know if the guy, he came home early from work one day. I don't know. But it appears that the guy has found out that the lady has stepped out on him, and they get into it, and she goes away from him to her father's house in Bethlehem in Judah. The household is in turmoil. There was a period of about 4 months. So she left the house, went to her dad's house for about 4 months to kind of ride out whatever is going on. If we're not careful when we read this, we'll just kind of glaze over the fact that adultery has just slid itself onto the scene, and this adultery is about to be the spark that sets off an epic disaster. They mishandled sex within this situationship marriage that they had going on. There was a mishandling of sex. Everybody say mishandling of sex. The culture then, and the culture at times now, barely does a double take at adultery and thereby grossly miscalculating its impact. See, sex in the Bible is very costly. God places a high cost on sex in the scriptures. God designed sex for marriage, to be done in the marriage between a man and a woman, and he puts this high cost on sex, and this is a good thing that God does, putting it on the in the china cabinet of all things that he created. He says sex is going to stay up there because it's valuable. You don't believe me. Exodus 22:16 and 17 might convince you. It says, if a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married and he sleeps with her, he must pay the bride price, and she shall be his wife. Did y'all catch that? If a man sleeps with a virgin, like he got to put a ring on it. Not just like, okay, will you call me tomorrow? No, it's like, no, you got to put a ring on. We getting married. Like you wake up in the morning, you're engaged because of what happened last night. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must still pay the bride price. If the dad says, I don't like that dude, you gotta go, he still gotta pay the daddy what he would have paid to have her as a wife. In Deuteronomy 22, 28, and 29, God puts a high price on sex. If a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married and he rapes her, he slips something into her drink, intoxicates her, rapes her, and they are discovered, he shall pay her father 50 shekels of silver. Y'all catch, everybody say 50 shekels of silver. And he must marry the young woman. Again, you wake up in the morning, you're engaged, for he has violated her. He can never divorce her as long as he lives. Now let me go back to the 50 shekels, because y'all don't know what that means. Y'all just gonna glaze over 50 shekels. 50 shekels was 2 to 3 years worth of salary. The average wage at this time was 15 shekels a year. The price of having sex outside of God's design was 2 to 3, even if you had a master's degree, it was gonna take you 2 years. 2 years of salary. If you got a GED, it's probably gonna take you 3 years. It's gonna take you probably about 3 years to pay off this one encounter. One encounter. Everybody say the cost of sex. Come on, y'all can talk back to me. The cost of sex is high. Come on, turn to your neighbor and say the cost of sex is high. Sex is the fine china. God puts a fine china value on marriage, and thus he puts a high value on this idea of sex. Really, adultery was punishable by death. If you look in Leviticus chapter 20 and 10, this is what God had taught for several hundred years, but we find the nation of God at this point, they have their fingers jammed in their ears like, God, we don't want to hear that. We just kind of want to do whatever we want to do. And this mishandling of sex over time begins to see things spiral out of control. Here's what our culture says. Our culture says life is short, have an affair. Life is short, have an affair. This is what the tagline of Ashley Madison says. Ashley Madison is a website that is catered towards people who are married or in relationships who want to have a side piece or they want a weekend lover. And do you realize over 46 million people around the world are subscribers to Ashley Madison? Did y'all catch that? Over 46 million people. That is, I didn't do the math, but that's like California, Texas, and let's say New York. I don't know if that's accurate completely, but let's just say we take all those people, that's let's say it's 46 million people. I don't know, it's probably not that many. Let's say all of Texas. Everybody in Texas is the equivalent, is subscribed to this site. What does that tell you? That there's a whole lot of people that says life is short. Have an affair. It's not that big of a deal. But they have grossly miscalculated what God desires for sex. Adultery was so bad in the Old Testament that when God was furious at the nation of Israel, to describe how they had betrayed him, he uses graphic examples of adultery to make his point. And he calls them over and over again, you are an adulterous people. Not that y'all are bad, y'all are adulterous. And he says that this is bad. It's a bad mishandling of sex. It erodes trust. It causes emotional wounds. It is a violation of the deepest form of human intimacy. So it's no surprise that this mishandling of sex is what kicks off the events that are about to unfold in this chapter. But the truth of the matter this morning is you don't have to wait until you're married to mishandle sex and make a mess of your marriage even before somebody asks you to marry them. Or before you ask someone to marry. You're saying, well, how can I mess up my marriage, my sex life in my marriage, and I'm not married? Well, one way is through fornication. You know what fornication is? Fornication is sex when you're not married. That's what we call fornication. Everybody say fornication. Let's just get. I know y'all are uneasy and it's getting a little tense. That's okay. Everybody say fornication again. Okay, fornication. Fornication, again, is sex outside of marriage. The culture says fornication really doesn't cost that much. If you're a man, it says it just costs you the price of dinner and a movie. Just take her out to dinner, take her to a movie, come back to the crib, put on a little Chris Brown, make sure you got a bottle of something, a little yak, a little Bacardi. As long as you got a little bottle of something, that bottle gonna cost you $20. Dinner and a movie and drinks may cost you $100. The price of fornication is really not that high. If you wanna be certain, throw in the cost of a box of condoms. Throw in the cost of a package of birth control pills, and that's all it's really going to cost you. That's what the culture says. It's not gonna cost you. It may cost you a little bit of commitment. He may stalk you for a little while. She may slide into your DMs for a couple of months, so it may cost you some annoyance. But really, the cost of fornication is not really that high. No real cost. And look, and check this out. If you don't get pregnant or get an STD, it really didn't cost you nothing. Because you can go back to work, put in a little overtime, and you can get that money right back. It really didn't cost you anything. But really, fornication does not set you up to be successful in marriage. Believe it or not, you're not getting in good practice for marriage. What you're really doing is you are encouraging this Burger King type of sex. You know what Burger King says? Have it your way, right away. And so what you get to do when you're fornicating is you have Burger King sex. You go out and I like I like tall men. I like dark men. I like men whose beard game matters. I like light-skinned guys. I like athletes. I like short guys. I like this. And it's kind of like Baskin Robbins. There's 31 different flavors, and I'm gonna try each one of them. Or it's like, I like tall women. I like short women. I like women with a little meat on their bones. I like women who have I like natural hair. I like processed hair. I like lace fronts. I like all kinds of different things. And what you do is like 31 flavors. There's 31 flavors of women that I like, and I'm gonna make sure that I sample each one of them. But then the bad thing is one day when you say, I do, now you've got one flavor for the rest of your life. After you've been living a life where you've been eating 31 flavors, I go in today, I want the strawberry ice cream. I go in tomorrow, I want the cookie dough. I go in the next day, I want the pecan praline. And now you're stuck with not stuck, but now you get the privilege of just having cotton. Now you get the privilege of just having cotton candy ice cream. Y'all are a mess. You get the privilege, the honor of just having cotton candy ice cream all day. All day. And that's a good, cotton candy is good. It's a good ice cream. It's good ice cream. Y'all are a mess. Oh, Lord. But what's really going on is sin is going on. So fornication is not just, I feel guilty in the morning because I probably shouldn't have done what I did. It's sin. Let's just call it what it is. Fornication is sin. But then when we watch shows like The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, and they go to, I think they call it Fantasy Island. Anybody know about? Y'all want to admit it? Okay. Fantasy Suites or something? Okay. They go to Fantasy Island, and basically what they're doing is they take the top 4 people, and they're going to take a sample. They're going to have a night of intimacy just to kind of see how things are. And when we see these things on TV, we're like, that's not sin, that's beautiful. We look at it, and I know we say that because the ratings for The Bachelor and Bachelorette are so high. They're still on TV. Why is it still on TV? It's been on TV since I was like in high school. And I ain't been in high school in a long time, since the 90s. And The Bachelor and Bachelorette are still out. Why? Because it's like we don't see this as sin. We just see it as like we just want to see who's going to win the rose. And they would just make a beautiful baby together. Even if they don't get married, they make a beautiful baby together. And so we see that sex is more than just feeling used, or maybe we think the cost is just I might just catch some feelings and I shouldn't, or maybe they break my heart but I can move on, or maybe it's drama. We see that we have taken something that God has placed this great value on, and when we are stuck in fornication, we just throw this valuable thing on the clearance rack. And we say, hey, anybody can afford this. Anybody can come get this. Anybody can have a piece of this. When God says no, like the woman, like you're worth 3 years' wages just for one time and a ring at the same time. So when we're stuck in fornication, we grossly miscalculate and mishandle God's intention for sex. The culture, here's another way we mishandle sex. The culture says that pornography is okay. Like there's no cost to pornography. That is like my own thing. I'm not hurting anybody. It's all good. I might actually be doing a good thing with pornography. There's no cost. What pornography does is it objectifies women over time. It objectifies men over time. And if you find yourself happen to be married and into pornography, what you're doing is you are being very unfair to your spouse. Because now you are, in multiple ways, now you are putting your spouse in the unenviable position of looking like, performing like an actor who does this all day, every day on TV, and your spouse got a job. Your spouse has to do work and has to go to work and has to get up, has to clean the house, has to do laundry and all this stuff, and is not a paid actor selling their body like we see on a pornographic video or image or whatever the case may be. So we're putting our spouse at a disadvantage, and then we may wonder, why am I not attracted to my spouse? Well, that's because you're attracted to the lady on the video. Because you're attracted to the dude on the sex tape. Why is it? Let me just ask you, this is not on script. Why is it every time a sex tape come out, we want to see it? Do you not realize like that is pornography and that is sin? No, but we're like, no, it's trending. It's viral. I want to see what the latest R. Kelly or Kim Kardashian or whoever is trying to make some money. I just want to see the sex. I just want to see what's going on. That's what the culture says is cool. But God says, no, pornography is sin. Now you're saying, well, why is pornography sin? Well, pornography is all about lust. Everybody say lust. Lust is sin. Everybody say lust is sin. So the whole premise of pornography is to lust after somebody, a man or a woman. It's you're lusting after someone. What did Jesus say in Matthew 5, 27 and 28? Jesus says, if you look upon a woman with lust, you already fell into adultery. You're like, but wait, I didn't touch her. I didn't even call her. She didn't even respond to my direct message. He says, but if you look upon her with lust, which is what porn is all about, if you look upon her or you look upon him with lust, you have already committed. It's just like you committed the act. Now, don't say, well, since I already committed, I might as well just do it. No, that's not what it's saying. And you'll find yourself in even more trouble doing that than even thinking the thought. But even thinking the thought and lusting after already throws you into sin. It's not a sin to lust after the naked body of your spouse, but outside of that, it is simply sin. Now, here's what married people say about pornography. They say, it's not what they say, but what married people will do is use pornography as a way to mask problems in their marriage. So instead of a man doing the hard work of pursuing their spouse, wooing them all day, sending flowers to the job, writing a nice note and leaving it on the seat of her car before she leaves, cooking a nice dinner, pulling out the candles, pouring some sparkling cider into the glasses and drinking some non-alcoholic bubbly or something. Just because you see, when a man does all that, then you don't need to get on your phone and look up some pornographic site. So what it does, it caters to lazy men who say, I would just rather pull out my phone, have sex with this lady on my phone and myself, and my wife, she can fend for herself. Ladies, it's the same way. I don't feel like being bothered with this dude. I just want to do my own thing. And so instead of doing the hard work of making sure I am attractive and making sure that I am available and making sure that things are good in the marriage, man, I'll just look up my own stuff and sleep with this man in my mind and my husband where he can go fend for himself. And what we do, pornography masks so many wounds in a marriage. It's what it will mask the wounds in a marriage. And we're thinking, well, I'm just not putting pressure on my spouse. They don't have to be available. I don't have to woo them or anything. I don't have to inconvenience them. No, that's not Bible. That's lazy. And it's sin. And so instead, when we are not stuck in pornography, what happens is now we want our spouse. Now we're like, okay, dang, oh man. Even though her hair's not done today, she still look good. Man, even though his belly look a few inches bigger, where are you going? You got to go to work today? Now, when you're stuck in pornography, you never have those thoughts. Because as soon as you have those thoughts, you pull out your tablet. And you know it's wrong because you don't pull out your tablet in front of your spouse. Or your kids, you pull it out, you pull it out in secret. You wait for your husband to leave before you pull out your phone. Because you know there's something in you that's telling you this is not right. It's a violation of my marriage. If you're single and you're stuck in pornography, what you're doing is just setting yourself up to have the same problems in marriage that you're having right now. And what'll happen is you think when you say I do, you're gonna be having sex every day and it's all good. But what you've really done is you've caused yourself to be addicted to digital sex. And digital sex will never satisfy you. You just want more. That's why we call it pornography addiction. Because you have some, then you need more to give you the same effect, and you need more and more to get the same effect, and you need more and more and more to get the same effect. And pretty soon, you're stuck in an addiction that you can't get out of. And guess what's gonna happen when you say I do? You're gonna carry that same addiction right across the aisle. Enough about pornography? Y'all got it? Those stuck in pornography, fornication, adultery, when we don't calculate properly the cost of that, we land right into James chapter 1, 14 and 15. What does James 1, 14 and 15 say? But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. In 15, but then when lust is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is accomplished, it brings forth death. We land right here. This is where you live. If you're stuck in fornication and pornography, you're saying, well, God, where am I? This is where you are. You're in James 1, 14 and 15. And you're saying, well, what's in James 14 and 15? James 14 and 15 is this warning, is that when you give in to temptation, what happens is sin has been born. It's like a baby. There's like a little embryo of sin inside of you, men and women. There's a little embryo of sin. And if you don't deal with that sin, if you stay in that sin, stay settled in it, that sin is just gonna keep growing. It's gonna keep growing. You're like, man, I gotta wait. Hey, man, ain't nothing going on. Me and my wife, we still good. Me and my husband, we still good. Me and my boyfriend, we're still good. Everything's good. Everything's great. You posting selfies on the thing, and you're doing the face app. Look, oh, this is how we gonna look when we get old, and all this kind of stuff. You're doing all the most with your boo, thinking everything is okay. And what's happening is on the inside of you, sin is growing and it's growing and it's growing. And the Bible says eventually, though you don't see the impact of it now, eventually it's going to give birth to death. And we think because look, let me say it like this. When I was little, my parents, we used to bake Christmas cookies, chocolate chip cookies, we used to bake them. And my mother, I told y'all this, some of y'all this before, and we used to hide them. My mother used to hide them. And what we would do is we would sneak and we would get cookies out of the cookie tin and put it back, we would remember exactly how the tin was situated, how the wax paper was situated over the cookies. We pull out the cookies, shuffle them around a little bit so it wouldn't look like they were gone, and we put the container back just how it was. So we trying to be slick. And when the next day, if we didn't get in trouble, we go right back to the cookie tin and pull out more cookies, and we would keep doing this. And we, like, man, we getting away with this. Like, we good. But you don't realize over time when that cookie container is going to be empty. And there ain't going to be no way. Then there's no way for you to say it wasn't me and I didn't do anything. And so this is what happens. We think we're just getting away with it. But at the end of the day, God says your sin is going to be brought to light. At some point in time, our sin is going to give birth to death. That's where you're living. And some of us are closer to giving birth to death than others. Some of us are 9 months pregnant with sin and something about to jump off. Some sort of death is about to happen in your life, my life. Some of us, we just a couple months. So we like, we good. God let me get away with that. Probably not. But here's the good news. Here's the hope. If you are stuck, you don't have to stay there. 1 John 3:9 teaches us that no one who is born of God makes a practice of sinning, for God's seed abides in him. So not only do we, if you're in Christ, you don't have to have a seed of sin in you, because you have the seed of God in you. And you have the seed of God in you. If it abides in you, you cannot keep sinning because he was born of God. You have the seed of God in you, which empowers you to get free from the costly behavior of pornography, adultery, and fornication. Man, that took a long, oh God. We're gonna be here for a little bit longer, okay? Is that all right? I didn't mean to stay there that long. We only in verse 2. It's 30 verses in the chapter. We have to break this up. Okay, come on, let's go. Verse 3, then her husband arose, right? Everybody get back to the text. So they mishandle sex in the first two chapters, the concubine and the Levite with this situationship marriage, right? Verse 3, then her husband arose. He said, okay, I want her back. Now we don't know if he's mad at her. We don't know if he's frustrated. We don't know his mindset, but he says, I want her back. So he goes to her daddy's house, stays for a couple of days, and then they're on their way back home. As they're on their way back home, they have an opportunity to stay in the place where it gets dark, but they don't want to stay there because that's not a place where the people of God are. So they're like, look, we want to go to a place where the people of God are. So they go a little bit further and they find themselves sitting in the middle of the town square in Gibeah. Everybody say Gibeah. Now in Gibeah, an old man is passing through and he sees them in the town square and they say to the man, look, nobody's letting us into their house. There are no hotels. People have to let people into their house. And he said, no one's gonna let us in our house, and we have our own food. We have food for our donkeys. We have drink. We have everything we need to get through the night. All we need is a place to stay. And he says, look, just come on over to the crib. Just don't stay out here. You can come over to the crib. I'll take care of you. Don't worry about it. So they get to the crib. All right, second thing we have to do if we're gonna change the culture is we have to guard what we pass down. We have to guard what we pass down. Verse 22 says, while they were celebrating at the house, behold, the men of the city, certain worthless dudes, surrounded the house, pounding on the door. And when they spoke to the owner of the house, the old man saying, bring out the man who came into your house that we may have sex with him. Then the man, the owner of the house, went out and said, no, I have a different solution. You can have my virgin daughter, and I also have this concubine in here. She's kind of cute. We can send her out too, and y'all can have these two women. And what does he say? And you may ravish them and do to them whatever you wish. Did y'all catch that? This is a man talking about his virgin daughter. This is a father talking about his virgin daughter. She is probably around the age, I'm guessing 14, 15. People got married younger in these times, so she's still a virgin. That means she's probably not married, but she's probably about the age of 14, 15. She's probably getting close to marriable age. Most dads, when your daughter is 14, 15, 16, you should have a different mindset. You like, no, ain't nobody coming up in here. You ain't going to prom. Homecoming, you going with your friends. Ain't no limo. Look, I'm gonna Uber you to the deal and I'm gonna Uber you back. You ain't bringing no dude up in here. If he come in, my gun come out. If he come in, these hands coming out. That's what most dads do. And girls, y'all hate that. Like, daddy, why are you so hard? Why are you so mean? Why are you so strict? He's a good dude. Like, he ain't even on the honor roll. He ain't on the honor roll. What good is he doing? Look, if you're in high school and the dude ain't on the honor roll, what good can he be? He don't have a job. It's not like he's good at his job. It's not like he's a good provider. It's not like okay, I'm not gonna say it. It's not like he a good whatever. If he ain't on the honor roll, he ain't good. Because he has no other responsibility but to go to school. That's it. So, but daddy, he's good. Ladies, if you're in that age range, you should be glad you have a dad who cares about you and will protect you, or some male figure, or even your mother who will say, no, baby, you cannot hang out with him. You should be glad because you could have a daddy like the one in the text who says, you know what? It's all good. Man, go out there and see what's going on. Hey, go out there and make a little change. Bring it back. And then we can talk. Here's a drink, here's some drugs. Hey, go out there, have a little fun. You young, you're about that age, you can have some fun now. You could have a dad like that. Be grateful that you have a dad that actually cares. So here's a man, in order to protect a stranger, says, I'm gonna go out here and send my daughter. So I imagine he goes outside, closes the door behind him and said, look, y'all, I don't know how many men it was, but there's a bunch of them beating on the door. Send that dude out. And he's like, man, look, I'm not gonna send the guy out because y'all gonna rape him all night, but my daughter and his concubine, and they still like, no, we want the man. We don't want the women, we want the men want the men. And so he goes back in and he's like, all right, dude, we can send out these women and just see what happens to them. They still don't want the women. So here's what the husband, the Levite, does. He grabs his concubine, his wife. So this guy's offering up his daughter. This man is offering up his wife. Now, I don't know if he's still bitter about the adultery that just happened. Could be. I don't know if he's spiteful trying to get back at her. We don't know what the impact of the adultery is on the man, but he is willing to get the wife. Now, you can imagine the wife knows what's going on. And she's probably kicking and screaming as he grabs her, picks her up. They open the door and he throws her out there and closes the door. And you're saying, what? What is going on in the text? You're doing this to protect a stranger? To show this woman that she's worth, these women, that they are worth nothing more than they're just like a piece of meat that can be thrown out and you just do whatever you want with? And the sad thing is, we cringe when we hear this, but we don't cringe when we hear it in the music. Because the music is saying the same thing about women. I saw a video popped up, so I was maybe on Instagram or something, and it was these girls twerking, and I'm like, come on, y'all. Just shaking everything all in front of the camera with hardly anything on, and it had like thousands of likes. But we cringe at this. Why cringe at this if you don't cringe at the video? It's the same thing. It's saying, woman, you just a piece of meat. Just gonna shake it a little bit, and your DM's gonna blow up. Your direct messages for those who don't know. You're gonna get a whole bunch of messages from a whole bunch of dudes if you just shake that thing on camera. They gonna come for you. And we do it. And what are we saying? We're saying the same thing that the dad and the husband saying, women, you just a piece of meat. Get on out there and shake something. Man, it got quiet. All right. Husband grabs the wife, throws her out. Here's the disturbing thing is this is supposed to be a religious man. He's a Levite. You should say, wait a minute, his great-granddaddy used to work in the church. His dad did all these good things in the community. His grandfather was doing Bible study in his house. How this guy, coming from that heritage, that lineage, how did he get to the place where he is now throwing his wife out to these dudes? Well, the reality is that the debauchery of the city has crept into the household of God. The debauchery that's going on outside has now crept into the hearts of the people of God. And so you're saying, and so the place of God should be a safe place, a place where God's standard is upheld, where it's pure, it's holy, it's a safe space that you can get away from the debauchery. Some of y'all got, I think it might have been Edward and JT, one of them two, they got me watching The Walking Dead. Anybody seen The Walking Dead? Y'all can talk back to me, it's okay. Walking Dead, okay. And The Walking Dead is a zombie show. I didn't think I was gonna like it at first, but part of the tension in The Walking Dead is this. They are constantly trying to find a safe space. So they go to somebody's house and they find a safe space away from the zombies, but they know eventually we're gonna have to move because the zombies are eventually gonna overtake us and we're gonna have to move. And so in The Walking Dead, they're constantly moving from place to place, to city, they go to jail thinking we can lock ourselves in jail and then we'll be okay. We'll be free from the zombies. They can't get to us, but then the zombies overtake the jail. Then they go to the next place. They try to make communities that are safe, but eventually the zombies come in and take over. And you have this tension like, man, these people are never gonna be safe on earth again. And you just have this tension in your belly when you're watching it. And you feel so bad for these people. But The Walking Dead is kind of like what I think about when I think about the church. The church should be that safe place. And when the debauchery creeps into the church, then the whole society is walking around like The Walking Dead, looking for a safe place. Is this safe place? Can I find purity and holiness and things that are good for my kids? Can I find it in the church? Or has the church been overtaken by the zombies too? We see it here. The church has been overtaken, especially with this Levite. You say, well, how did he get to this place? Because you're saying, I would never do that. I would never get to this place. Well, what happens is, again, the society, instead of him transforming the culture, he has been transformed by the culture. Go back to Genesis 19. You don't have to do it now because we're out of time. In Genesis chapter 19, you'll read a story about a city called Sodom and Gomorrah. Anybody heard of that? In Sodom and Gomorrah, there was wickedness going on steroids in Sodom and Gomorrah. And a very similar situation happened. There was a man named Lot who had 2 daughters. The angel of the Lord had come to talk with them and was in the house, and the men of the town did the same thing. Knocked on the door. Hey, send the dude out. And Lot's like, no, I'm not gonna send the dude out, but here are my 2 virgin daughters. Y'all can have them. Y'all can have my virgin daughter. So this was kind of how the people of Canaan, where they are, this is kind of how that society just rolled. They just did that. So perhaps the Levite had heard tales of this happening. If they come wanting a visitor, all you do is just send out the girl, and he just accepted that. And so the society we see that was going on in Genesis 19, that same society, they're all in Canaan, has now crept into his thinking, and now all of a sudden he's doing what the society has modeled. That's all he did. He's just doing what the society modeled. It started off with tolerance, then tolerance leads to admiration, and then admiration leads to engagement. Let's put it on the table. Oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah, man, that's really good. Man, let me have the whole thing. And this is what happens. Tolerance, admiration, engagement. And here's what the culture says. Well, as long as the kid doesn't get pregnant or have an STD, it's okay. And if you believe this, your family or your future family is in the line of fire. Right now, you have them positioned to be in the line of fire if that's your mindset when it comes to sex. C.S. Lewis said this, indeed, the safest road to hell is the gradual one. The gentle slope is soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts. It's just real subtle. You're just walking, little sin here, little sex here, little friends with benefits there. He said, and slowly but surely, it's real subtle. It's nothing that's gonna jar your attention to make you say, whoa, let me repent and get right. It's just slow and subtle. Next thing you know, you end up, again, in James chapter 1, 14 and 15. So if you and I are in sin or have a faulty mindset of sex, if we adopt the same mindset society has about sex, don't be surprised what you'll do. And don't ever say, I would never do that. You will do this. You will do this if you have the mindsets of the society. That's what happened to him. A religious man, a righteous man, ends up passing down something to his daughter. Now, even if the daughter didn't get thrown out, but how do you think that affected her relationship with her dad? How do you think that affected the way she viewed herself? Like, man, my dad is willing to throw me out to the dudes just to get raped? I really must not be worth much. So when the next little dude come around talking some game, you're like, well, I ain't worth that much anyway, come on. I want to talk real. So what other lessons has she picked up living in a household with a father who believes what the society believes? See, he's supposed to be doing what Deuteronomy chapter 6 says. He's supposed to be teaching his kids the way of the Lord, meaning he's supposed to be teaching them, hey, this is what the culture's telling you, this is what God says, this is what you're supposed to do. But he's not doing that. He's basically modeling what the culture says in his house. And you wonder why she on a pole at 23. You wonder why she twerking all over Instagram. What did you bring home? What are you modeling at home? All right, let me get past that. Unfortunately for this woman, she's raped all night long. And when he comes outside the next day to get her, he calls her name, hey, whatever her name was, hey, come on, it's time to go, and there's no response. Tries to arouse her, no response, and he realizes that she's dead. She's been killed from a night of being abused by these men. He puts her on the donkey, he goes back home, and he does something crazy. I don't want to focus on this, though. He cuts her body up into 12 parts, sends packages to each tribe of the nation of Israel with a message saying, this is what's going on. This is how badly we have been living our life according to the rhythm of this song. This is the result. This is the product of what happens when we listen to God a little bit, we live for God a little bit, then we silence God and we settle into sin. Then things start falling apart, and then we holler out to God for help. God helps us, then we start living for God again, listening for a little while. Then we stop listening to God, we silence God, and we settle back into sin. He's saying, look at what happens when you do that over time. You get an arm, you get a leg, you get some kidneys, you get a head. And the nation of Israel, the other nations, the other 11 nations are appalled. What is going on in Benjamin's community? This is a good response. They are outraged at what just happened in Benjamin, one of their brothers' communities. Can't believe, man, that's what's going on in Katy? Y'all doing that in Katy? And y'all ain't saying nothing? Y'all just sitting over there in Cyprus like, man, that's just what they do in Katy. What? That's just what everybody doing. That's what's trending nowadays. But there was outrage. This is a good thing. This is my last point. We have to protect the society from spiraling. We have to, as the people of God, protect the society from spiraling. This is my last point. It says in the 12 tribes, now I'm in the next chapter, chapter 20. Then the tribes of Israel sent men through the entire tribe of Benjamin saying, what is this wickedness that is taking place among you? Now they come and confront them. They go out to Katy, say, look, man, what are y'all doing out there? What are y'all doing? Now, deliver up the worthless men that did this. Bring them out. Y'all know where they are, bring them out. But the sons of Benjamin would not listen to the voice of their brothers, the sons of Israel. Did y'all catch that? They're outraged, which means they have a standard. They say, look, I know society is saying this about sex, but the people of God have a higher standard. And y'all have slipped so deep into sin slowly over time that you've adapted the mindset of the culture. And that's a problem. We have some standards around here, and you have let your standards fall. This is the price. Let me say this. This is the price of everyone doing what is right in their own eyes. See, that's what the scripture says. The problem in Israel at this time is everybody's doing what's right in their own eyes. In our culture, we have the same problem. We say, you do you, and I won't say nothing, and I'll do me, and you don't say nothing to me, and everybody's cool. Everybody just do what you believe, live your own truth. But the problem is at some point in time, your truth is going to step on the toes of my truth. Because that's what happened in Benjamin. Benjamin's like, this is my truth. I'm living my truth. And everybody else is saying, but no, your truth is stepping on the toes of my truth. So without an absolute standard by which we live, somebody's going to step on somebody's toes. Inevitably, it just doesn't work. So the people of Benjamin are defending these dudes that have raped this woman to the point of death. They're defending them. Man, we're not going to let them out. We're not going to hand them over to you because that's just kind of what we do. So instead of fighting for justice, they're fighting to set these men free. Instead of raising the standard of decency, they push the standard lower into decay. There ain't no justice for these dudes. They didn't do anything wrong. Instead of sending a message that this type of sexual behavior is wrong for the people of God, they send a message that it's okay. It's all right. Just because you're part of the nation of God, that don't matter. This is how we live. And what it looks like today is where we throw in the towel on the standard of God. I had a friend once say, when he's talking about young people in particular, young people, he's like, man, they're going to have sex anyway. Might as well protect them. Might as well give them some birth control pills, give them some condoms, because they're going to do it anyway. What a sad day when the people of God just throw in the towel saying, man, we can't win. The culture's going to win. Society's going to win. Like what? Ye of little faith. Do you not know you have the seed of God in you? That you are victorious in Christ? You can do all things. But no, we just going to throw it. They're going to do it anyway, so might as well. And this is what they did in Benjamin. This is how we roll. We don't need a standard. So here's the question. Here's the question I ask of the text. Where are the men and the women that are upholding righteousness in the community? Why are they not saying anything? Why are they not defending these women? Why are they not standing up and saying, this is ridiculous. This cannot continue to happen in my community? Who's going to say something? Well, Benjamin, watch this, is full of drifters and chameleons. Remember we talked about those? Drifters are people of God who just like, man, you know, if it happens, it happens. It don't really affect me, whatever. Chameleons are those who really love the culture and want to be like the culture, but just kind of put some Jesus on it. But Benjamin is so full of drifters and chameleons that nobody will stand up and uphold the standard. Because we're just drifting. We're just out here. We're doing our thing. Let them do their thing. A cultural transformer stands up under God's standard for sex. And even if they get weary of holding up the standard, they continue to hold it up. And over time, no one would stand up for the standard in Gibeah. No one would do it. And this, the Bible says, is the final product of nobody doing anything to uphold the standard of God. But the good news today is that God always has some defenders. God always has some defenders. In verse 34, it says, when 10,000 choice men from Israel came up against Gibeah, y'all don't want to hand them over, we gonna get them. The battle became fierce. They fighting their brothers' people. They fighting their cousins, really. But Benjamin did not know that disaster was close to them, and the Lord struck Benjamin before Israel, so that the sons of Israel destroyed 25,100 men of Benjamin that day. God always has a remnant. God always has some defenders who say, not on my watch. Not while I'm alive. Not in this house. Not in my personal sex life. No, we're not going, No, we got a standard that we're going to live by, and we're not going to allow what happened in Benjamin to happen in my house. In my city? In my church? No, we're not going to do that. There's a movie called The Defenders on Netflix. It's a 4-part, it's a series. It's got like Luke Cage and Jessica Jones and who else? Daredevil and The Fist, Iron Fist. And the city is falling apart. New York is falling apart. Evil's trying to take over New York. And they say right before the last episode, they say, if New York is to survive, it's gonna be because of you four. Wasn't the whole city, he says, because there's you four. You defenders that God has given, or they have all these gifts, these defenders are gonna be the one that keep the city from falling apart. And this is what Shine Bible Fellowship is supposed to be about. We are supposed to be the defenders for the city. And when it looks like everything is gonna fall apart when it comes to sexual decency, we have a people right here, a remnant, God's defenders that say, not on my watch. Not in my church, not in my household, not in my community, not even in my own life am I gonna allow a standard to be lowered, because Benjamin is not gonna happen up in here. We're not gonna do it up in here. God is looking for a few good men and women who will take the bold step to refuse to mishandle sex, mishandle our families, and mishandle the standard for the community. Jesus was a cultural transformer, but the cost was high. The cost was high. The cost was higher than 50 shekels for him. The cost for him to be a cultural transformer cost him his life. It cost him his life. And because Jesus gave his life, he gave us freedom from the very things that we think have us bound. If you're here today and you're like, man, I just cannot get it right in the area of sex. I just cannot get it right when it comes to fornication, when it comes to pornography. I just cannot get unstuck. It's just a part of my life. And I wish so badly I could uphold the standard because I'm tired of paying the cost. If that's you, there's hope for you today. Really, there's been hope for you, but the Lord is letting you know that there is hope for you today, because you have the seed of God living on the inside of you if you are in Christ. And you can be free. You can be free. You don't have to pass on perhaps what was passed on to you. You can stop it right here with you and pass on something different. You can stop it with you, and you can change the church and the community. You really can. Not because you're special, only because you have the Spirit of God living on the inside of you. There is hope for you today. There is freedom available to you, and it comes through Christ. He paid it all so we could get it all. We lost it all in the garden in Genesis. Christ gave it all, and now we get it all. Did y'all catch that? We lost it all. Christ gave it all, and now we can have it all. Specifically, freedom through Christ.